Hello, good evening po sa inyong lahat. Welcome to yet another episode of PD After 5 brought to you by GEG Ortigas. Now, this event is being held live in coordination with all the other GEGs in the Asia Pacific. So all of them will be having their version of Hyflex Learning. So this is Flex Your Hyflex Skills. So I'll be moderating this particular broadcast together with Paula. Paula, how about you say hi to our audience?
Hello, everyone. So you might be wondering why we're speaking in straight English. You guys will know in a while. Pero bumati muna tayo. So cut muna natin ng konti yung pag-English natin man. And
Okay,
let's
good,
try
good
to
chat.
say hi to hello po sa mga teachers na nanonood. We're live in YouTube. I think we're live in the YouTube channel of GEG Philippines. So if you guys are watching and if you guys have something to say, just make sure to uh, type your questions, your comments, and also just say hi to us right at the live chat. So once again,
Mm-mm.
ako nga pala si Paula Cortez. My name is Teacher Paula. Um, one of the leaders of GEG Ortigas. And like what Maan said, so kaming
Mhm.
dalawa ang face of GEG Ortigas.
For
Tayo
today,
yung
so magandang
chartista today.
baka kami yung chartistas for today. So magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat, lahat po ng mag-grow na nakikinig sa atin sa
Mhm.
YouTube. Okay, so we'll be switching to English quite often this
Right.
particular session. Okay, but just so and I think Pao, maybe you should introduce our first guest already.
Yes. So for our first guest, his passion is to give students the ability to think computationally. Wait lang, gusto ko yung part na yun. And just so you guys know, that skill is would enable the students to program effectively, solve variety of problems, and make them much more resilient. So I'm pretty sure you guys have seen him in Twitter. His name is James, and he has been working in computing since 1998. Firstly, in the industry, and now in education. He has published a range of academic papers, articles for popular magazines, including Hello World, Linux User, and the NST. And he has already published his best selling book, Gamified Classroom. Have you read that, Maan,
Yes,
before?
I have. Okay.
Yoo-hoo, me too. So he has already spoken in many events, including the very first Raspberry Jam at Cambridge University, Scratch Day East, Google Singapore, BETT, IRCOS,
Mm.
21st Century Learning, and he has done a lot of teach meets in KL. He is a longtime member of Computing at School and founder of the Southeast Asia Computer Science Teachers Association. He's an Apple Distinguished Educator, a Google Innovator, ang dami, uh, um, MIE expert for 2020 to 2022, Raspberry Pi certified educator. He's also a fellow Mirandanet, and 21st Century Teacher of the Year in 2014. So, teachers, let us welcome James Abela.
Welcome,
Thank you.
James.
That was extraordinarily well done on all of that. I didn't realize how many acronyms I could fit in there. So, no, I really appreciate it. But really, to be honest, I just come to you today as a teacher because I don't want you to get the wrong impression. I'm a full time teacher. I teach every day, and I've been teaching Hyflex for about the last, well, since 2020. So we've been on, off, mixed the whole way. And I want to give you an honest account because you can't do as well as online, offline at the same time.
Right.
That isn't actually possible. You're going to have to make some compromises somewhere, but I think you can give an experience that all of your students will appreciate and will really help you. And I will say that my students in the older age range have been absolutely fine with online learning and haven't lost out on the education, but they have lost out, of course, on the social factors to some extent. So,
Okay, that's
um,
great. That's great to hear from you, James. Let's welcome our next guest first, and perhaps he can add on to what it is that you have just
sure.
said. So,
Mhm.
Allow me to introduce my mentor from the Innovator Academy, Sethi the Clercq. So Sethi is very passionate about technology integration and how it impacts education and student learning. He's a full-time teacher as well as a Google for Education certified trainer and a Google Innovator, an MIEE, and computing subject leader. He loves training both in in-person events as well as online during streams, and you can actually catch him in his YouTube channel with tips, tricks, and tutorials. That's the Flip Classroom tutorial. Let's welcome Sethi the Clerk. There, hi
Hello,
Sethi.
thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited, and it's great to see familiar faces, so that's always good. And I'm looking forward to having a chat about Hyflex, because similar to what James was saying, I'm still a full-time teacher, and Hyflex seems to be the new way. We're all going to experience it at some point, and so it's great to have this discussion. Thank you for having me.
All right. So I guess we can go to our first question already. That we can share ideas. Really, just be very casual about it. Can you guys briefly define for us what Hyflex learning is and how does it differ, let's say, to hybrid instruction or all the other things that we have out there?
Okay. So my understanding, and I think it is a fairly fluid thing, is that you have online learning, which is purely online. You have in-person learning, which is purely in person. And then you have hybrid learning, which is some of it in person and some of it online, but not at the same time.
Mm.
Hyflex is delivering online and in person at the same time. And that is why it is the ultimate challenge, and why I said there's going to have to be compromises. I think we should also bring in two more terms: synchronous learning, where you are learning together, and asynchronous, where perhaps I give Sethi a book to read, he goes away and reads it and comes back to me. And again, these are all things that can help mix and blend and help keep your sanity as a teacher.
Yeah, I want to add on to that as well, is sort of that other definition of flex in terms of flexibility, being able to quickly jump from one to another. So for example, your student may be in person today and for, without any prior sort of notification, be online the next. And sort of having that flexibility to jump from one to another from that, whereas, for example, in a hybrid format, you would know, okay, I have these students Monday and Tuesday, and I have these students Thursday and Friday. Whereas in Hyflex, you don't know how many will be online, how many will be in person, who will be online, who will be in person, and you're teaching both at the same time.
Okay, that sounds like a challenge. Now, a lot of us here in the Philippines have not actually done any Hyflex learning. A lot of us know of it in theory. So, what do you think is the best way how can a teacher prepare for Hyflex? Like, if do you have any tips on skills, on any hardware they might need, or any software that they may need?
Okay. I think if you really want to do Hyflex learning, it is so useful to have two devices.
Mm.
Now, one can be your phone, or it can be whatever, and one should be your workhorse, whatever. But I think you need that second camera and device. And ideally, this is not exactly hardware. This is having a trustworthy student who can handle that second device. That will make your life so much easier. So if you can actually say, right, we're videoing it, or you can have a tripod or something and have a student assistant. If you're lucky enough to have a teaching assistant, even better. But having a student assistant and helping them and training them up will save your sanity as a teacher. And for me, with older children, that's very easy. I know who I can trust, and I can just give them my iPad and say, here's my iPad, send it. And the other thing I would say is make sure all your resources are fully online using Google Sites or Google Slides, because that again is really going to help you, because the students are always going to be able to see your slides. They're always going to be seeing where you're at, and you need to have fully electronic resources. Otherwise, it's going to be very challenging. I better pass it to Sethi.
No, I completely agree. And I would add to that, in addition to having that trustworthy student or someone who can help out and the hardware, I would say, as you're planning your lessons, very carefully plan with Hyflex in mind. So almost similar to how you would plan in a Key Stage 1 classroom or an early years classroom, where you're planning for that continuous provision, you're carefully thinking about different stations in the classroom. Hyflex learning, I think during your planning, should be very similar, where you're very carefully thinking about, okay, this aspect of the lesson, and this is what it will look like for the Hyflex student who is online. And then another aspect, this is what it will look like to our students in class. And that doesn't necessarily take a lot of extra time, but you do have to keep that in mind. I would also add to that is make decisions about the technology you're going to use based on that Hyflex format. So, for example, I would, during our computer science lessons, I love using the actual whiteboard because I like to write out code rather than do live coding all the time. That doesn't necessarily always work for a Hyflex lesson because they may not see that whiteboard. And so what I've done is I've simply just switched it to a digital whiteboard. So instead of using interactive whiteboard, instead of using whiteboard pens, I'm now using a digital whiteboard. I'm still writing and it's still my handwriting, but now that can be presented into the online environment as well. That was just a small little change. And for example, seeing as this is a GEG meetup using Google Meet, I have an additional device that is joining that same room using the companion mode. So it's not eating up any bandwidth. It's not eating up, my camera feed or my audio feed. It is just there to present that screen, which is then the whiteboard. So definitely plan with Hyflex in mind, and maybe even color code it on your planning. That really helped me personally.
Yeah, it's great to see so many people from so much Indonesia, Philippines, India. Wow, we're really getting out to everybody tonight.
So yeah,
Yes, hello.
so welcome everyone. So just in case that you have just joined us for tonight, so we will be talking about Hyflex. This is brought to you by GEG Ortigas and also in cooperation with GEG APAC, because we have been doing this monthly most of the time. And today we have James and Sethi with us. So they have already given us a very good introduction to what Hyflex is, and we are currently talking about, are there any skills or hardware or software that teachers would need to know or have when making this work? But one of the things that I want to ask James and Seti is that um, most of the schools they don't necessarily have a huge budget for something like this. Most probably because it's something new to us, or it's something that wasn't the focus of the school before. So does a school have to have a substantial budget to support
I
Hyflex
think
learning?
I think you do need. I mean, I think a lot of the stuff can be free. So all the Google tools are free. So I think those are your best friends. If you're not going to have a budget, I think you need to settle for more an asynchronous approach. That means that you're going to send out things in Google Classroom. You're going to just pre-record videos, perhaps, and things like that. If you want fully synchronous, the teachers really have to have two devices. I can't see you being able to handle, your computer and your screen and a video at the same time without that going on. Because without a camera in a separate device, you're not going to be able to set up. However, that doesn't have to be particularly expensive. It can just be an Android phone, or it can just be an iPad on top of, whatever the teacher's using, which might be a desktop machine, whatever it is. Alternatively, if you're really cheap, I suppose the driver for the teacher could just be something as simple as a Raspberry Pi doing the non-video stuff, and then you actually do it. But even Raspberry Pis, I'm afraid, are in short supply at the moment from what I was reading. So I think, whatever you can do to get that second device together is important. And I would say the easiest thing to get hold of these days with a decent camera is probably a mobile phone. A mobile phone being, don't be fussy about brands or whatever, you know, because you know, a decent 1080 camera these days, I would imagine any phone from the last 3 to 5 years would be good enough that's of a decent-ish spec. Can you agree, Sethi?
Absolutely. I also want to add that often something that is overlooked is the audio quality. And so if you are feeding your class sound or your instructions into a Meet or into a digital platform, I would highly recommend that you use some type of earbuds or microphone. Again, lavalier mics have dropped significantly in price. So if you could get, you know, an however small budget together, maybe it is, you know, a single lavalier mic for, you know, per teacher or per class, that will make a huge difference. They may not see everything that's happening in the classroom, but if your resources are online, if it's shared online, if you're feeding your digital whiteboard into the Meet with good audio, they are going to be able to follow along most of the lesson really well. And then that will also offset a little bit of that budget needed for an additional device. Now, again, ideally you have multiple devices. I mean, you know, I feel very privileged to teach at a school where each student that is online is represented by a physical device in the class. So if we have 3 students online, we have 3 Chromebooks in the class, each with their own feed and their own camera. That is not always realistic. And so I think the most realistic thing there is your phone. We all have phones, and our phones are excellent devices. They have great cameras. Most of them have really good microphones as well. The speakers won't be good, but the microphones are usually good. And so when we get to connect a lavalier or an external mic to that, it really ups the quality. And then that phone, as long as it's plugged in, because battery will be your biggest enemy, as long as it's plugged in, you can use it for your lessons. Now, I also like what Adriana said about having upgraded. So her school apparently has upgraded their projectors to allow for whiteboard input, or upgraded the cameras. Again, those are all going to require budget. I really like that. And if that's possible, that's the ideal scenario. But if not, look at the phones your teachers have available. Maybe tweak your policies for this Hyflex, because many schools will have policies that do not allow mobile phones or do not allow personal devices. Maybe this is a case where management has to make an exemption to that policy to allow mobile devices in order to be able to provide Hyflex learning.
I saw a YouTube channel recently, and there was quite a lot of talk about cheap writing tablets.
Right.
Sethi?
Right. Wacom, I think.
Are we talking about one of these?
There's the one.
Nice.
I've been in the room.
I may. Well, hold on. These are excellent writing tablets. So this is actually the small one. So these are XP pens. Wacom has got some very cheap ones
Here
as
we
well.
go.
There we go.
Somebody
So
joined us just now.
This,
I know.
this
You
will
knew,
make such
you
a
knew Gary
difference.
can keep quiet. Yeah.
And I'm not sure about yours, Gary, but I'm assuming that yours is like this one, just connects to a mobile device as well.
Right.
And it
That's
allows
right.
for pen input. So this is what I would suggest. I mean, look at how small this is. You can literally just shove it in a bag or carry it with you. For those teaching art lessons, design lessons, I'm now thinking, for example, the makerspace and engineering and stuff, you'll need a bigger one. So these are slightly bigger. But again, they don't have to be that expensive. And again, you get a single one because not all your teachers are going to need them all at the same time. Start with one and prioritize those teachers that will need those first. If they have a fancy interactive whiteboard or a great camera that can record that whiteboard, this won't be a priority. If they haven't got a camera in the room, then maybe this can go to that teacher so that everyone has a sort of a leveled playing field.
And I would also say it does depend on the original hardware. For example, if you already have a reasonably new iPad, the Apple Pencil is a no-brainer. You know,
Yes.
it's expensive, but it's such an amazing device. But it's not expensive if you already have the iPad, right? So, and you know, then you have the perfect thing is all you have to do is screen capture. So you have
Mhm.
everything. And yeah, your iPad, if you have a reasonably new one, that is already an awesome thing.
Mhm.
And as I say, your phone is already an awesome thing, and just
Mhm.
use it. I tend to disagree with Sethi very slightly because of my subject. I would not need a pen in any way, shape, or form because I can touch type.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would definitely go for a Bluetooth keyboard over a mouse or a pen or something because of the nature of my subject. So it is also thinking about it is
Yeah.
thinking about the needs of your teacher in front of
I
you.
think
That
Absolutely,
Logitech
James.
one is awesome.
Absolutely, and not just that, it's also the age you're working with.
Yeah.
Right.
When you're looking at some of the youngest students I work with, I mean, Key Stage 1, and yeah, typing has no point there. You
Yes.
need to, as you're doing the storytelling and as you're having them explain their stories, having them draw, and then those students that are joining via Hyflex digitally see what they're drawing, then motivates others. And so I think it really depends on the group you're teaching and the subject. The same goes for cameras. You've got some amazing document cameras out there that are not necessarily too expensive, but not everyone will need that. Not every subject needs that. So I think that's a really good thing to mention there, James.
Yeah, and
Really
I
great.
also think, in terms of, you might have a decent microphone in something like a Bluetooth headset, which
Mhm.
actually is surprisingly good. Yeah, that's the other problem, Adriana. That they,
Gotta
yeah,
get a
that's why
case.
I'm saying teacher rather than student. Although
Yeah.
there was a version of a Logitech device to go with it, which was literally kept on a wire to stop people losing it. I did see that at
Also,
Apple once, but
also
unfortunately,
cost-wise, the Apple Pencil is obviously amazing, but the
Mhm.
Logitech pencils that are compatible with the iPads are really good as well.
yeah, they
Mhm.
are. And as I say, some of them are cabled, so you can't lose them because they're cabled into the case, which I think for younger year groups is good, but also for teachers of younger year groups as well. You know what I mean?
Yes, we understand. Really great
I
input from both of there
I
are
agree.
mhm.
Our
There's
secondary has our lower secondary has a one-to-one Chromebook program, and I must say about 70% of them have lost their stylus.
Oh
So
yeah,
it's definitely an issue.
yeah. I mean that's true because Android is just the same, isn't it? You can have styluses, and
Right.
if you've already got a device which is compatible with some kind of stylus, you're gonna get great results out of it. Yeah, so it's all good. Hi, by the way.
hello. Okay, so a couple of questions in the chat box already. Pau?
Yes, so we have one question from Miss Beatrice and Garvida. So she was asking, how can collaboration work in Hyflex Learning with students you are teaching in person and students you are teaching online? So I think the question here is that how do you make collaboration work for those who are online
Yeah.
and those who are in person?
Oh,
I think actually this is actually this can be a help to you actually, because what you can do is you can mix your groups up so that you have a host in the classroom who hosts the online. And it does depend how many students you've got with devices. So if they've got phones or whatever, then they can also connect to that student. And often you want that student in that group connected via that student's phone into the classroom, because those students in the classroom are going to give the online student a much better voice. So that's what I would suggest is do actually group by some students online, some students offline. Of course, if all students have devices, then it's very easy to use the usual Google Docs and slides. And you know, some days I forget that the students online and they're collaborating just as well because we've all got devices. But if you haven't all got devices, try and get a phone and get that kind of video connection if you can, or even a text connection or a chat connection, so that the student online can feel included. I'll pass it across to Sethi.
Yeah, same answer. I think it completely depends on your makeup of the class. And for example, in our situation, each online student has a physical representation in the class
Right.
because of that device. And so it makes it very easy to collaborate with in-person students because that device is physically present at their group and they're collaborating, communicating. And if it gets too noisy or too busy, they just plug in headphones and that collaboration can continue. If you do not have that, that device, that makes it trickier. So obviously then you need to start thinking about, okay, do we want to, use maybe a different platform that allows them to, brainstorm alongside the others so that it's visually represented on a larger screen or on a presentation. But I think what's key is to look at the makeup of your class. How many devices are there? How many students are online? How many are in person? And whenever possible, I would personally try to mix the online with the in-person as much as possible. Don't just have one group. You're all the online kids, you're together, and all the I wouldn't do it that way. I would always go for that mix. And they will actually, the other students will have amazing ideas on how to collaborate, because maybe they've done something on Discord, or maybe they've done something in a game, and this is a way that worked really well, and they'll come up with a solution.
And I think also during these challenging times, you might have to moderate how much you're allowed to use the chat. So, for example, Google Docs does have a chat facility, which you might normally not want to use because, of course, the safety issues. But in these times, to allow mixed messaging, perhaps allow some of the chat functions within the more moderatable things. So, for example, admins can moderate those kinds of chats. Same with Discord, actually. Ironically, it has a lot stronger functionality in terms of what it can do if your admin can understand it, because if the admin set up the groups, you can actually have bots really closely monitoring things. You can set up really strong measures to make sure online bullying isn't happening, but it does require an understanding of the network. And I would actually say Discord has one of the strongest capabilities of filtering and checking and sorting chat and encouraging good behavior. But it does require somebody who knows how to do it. So I would say that's an investment for your admin team, is looking into those chat channels, because both of those also require very little internet, because text chat is obviously the least requirement. And I'm assuming particularly in, more rural areas out in the villages that, the internet's not going to be as good as in the middle of a city.
And things like Google Chat have come a long way. However, I think the biggest strength of applications like Discord, like what James was mentioning, and Discord is basically the free version of Slack, isn't it? It's sort of very similar platform. It's the back channel. It's to have just that voice channel, that back channel that is open, that people can just pop in and out of. So if you can sort of recreate that within your school policies and within your school environment, maybe it is a case of having, clear expectations of, okay, we have a single Google Meet that is open. Nobody turns their camera on in that meet, and it's just used as a back channel. Then maybe that could work, as long as everyone is on the same page. Because we have seen students that have been very successful doing it that way. They had 2 different tabs open. With 2 different meets, and they knew exactly that this was the lesson meet and that was the back channel, and they knew that that's how it worked. If you have students that are mature enough and responsible enough to turn those mics on and off in the right meets, then it'll work. Now, if you have a class where you're constantly having to remind them to unmute themselves, it's not going to work, because keeping track of multiple tabs, it's not going to work.
But equally, Google Docs is actually pretty good for a back channel if you just want the basics. And I often use that when I've got 1 or 2 students, hey, here's a Google Doc. I'll come check on it occasionally. But actually, most students, if they've got enough of voice, they want to be able to speak up. And all I do is I leave my laptop or I leave my device with a student. Even if I'm the other end of the classroom, you can guarantee that student in class is going to give my attention.
Just to let them know that there's something in the chat. You touched on something that I think is very important to a lot of teachers. Like, you talk about all these chat groups and all of these platforms that we can use. How about the grades for those who are teaching younger kids? How do you think they can?
What did you say? Sorry, I missed that word.
Early grades, for example, for grades 1, 2, 3. How do you think we can do that for them?
I'll let Sethi take that one.
Yeah, I work a fair bit with the younger ones, and it is very different. It is very different. I think one of the things there is the functionality of whatever platform you choose needs to align with what you're trying to achieve in your class. So, for example, we had the school expectation of using Google Workspace, and that was prior to being able to remotely mute someone, and it was an absolute headache. As you can assume, 3, 4, 5-year-olds are constantly unmuting themselves. Ooh, squirrel behind you! That doesn't necessarily work as well. So we then,
Right.
for a short period of time, used a different platform that did give us that capability. But I think with those younger grades and those younger year groups, I think the value of an additional teacher, or the value of that additional device with someone monitoring that device actively as you're teaching, becomes even more important. So we have some amazing teacher assistants at our school, and they are on it. They are just incredibly hardworking, and they really are great at getting those children as involved as possible. However, I would say Hyflex, as your students get older, it's easier. So the younger your students are, the more I personally feel the emphasis should be on asynchronous learning, on focusing on those key skills, maybe having an introduction to the lesson together, your story times together, some of the follow-up discussions together, but the bulk of the lesson, the bulk of the teaching, I think in an asynchronous format works much, much better. I know it's not ideal, and I know not everyone will have the support at home. We have very busy parents. A lot of students may struggle with that supervision. So that's where we obviously need to be flexible, hence the flex in Hyflex. But I do feel that they benefit from additional asynchronous resources, even if that means that your entire lesson that you're delivering live has been recorded during the lesson and then shared with them after the lesson. That too works in some cases.
Great, great input there for those who are
Yeah, and
teaching
I
primary.
also think with younger children, things like seesaw and video,
Right.
and sometimes it's okay for them to watch it like television, you know. But also, I don't know about you, but I find that the younger children are more willing to speak out than the older ones. Is that true, Sethi?
Yeah, that's why I said that functionality to mute them is essential. Whereas with the older
It's
ones,
not a problem for me,
I was going to say it's almost sort of you need two policies. The younger the students are, the more you need technical functionality to remotely mute them, and the
Right.
older the students are, the more you need to think about: are you actually there? Can you turn your camera on for a minute?
Yeah.
Because they might walk off, and then in some cases, I mean, they might have a video in OBS on a loop, and they've already left the building. So I think it's very important to
There's a
really
cure for that.
think of
I
your.
just mentioned how I'm going to cut their Steam connection or their PS4 connection, and they come back real quick.
Back immediately. But yes, it's a bit more challenging, I think, for the primary years, largely because they demand attention immediately. They don't know how to take turns yet. There's very little self-management at their end, and so that can become challenging. So
And
that just
also the curriculum itself. I mean, in the early years, and in really in sort of pre-prep and key stage 1, it's all about the hands-on learning. It's all about those
Right.
experiences together. It's about physically moving objects, like building sentences. You're taking trains and you're joining them together. You've got some trains with verbs and some with nouns and some with, and you're joining them together. And it's very difficult to recreate that in an hour-long virtual session. So those students that are joining virtually, by default, are missing out on 75% of the learning that takes place in those younger year groups, because they are still moving around and using that continuous provision. So that's where the emphasis should really, as a teacher, go to asynchronous continuous provision, almost like having a digital menu of activities they can dip in and out of. I mean, and Google Slides can be used for that. Maybe you build a single slide deck with, say, 9 activities, with 9
Right.
images.
Mm.
Those images are linked because Google Slides makes it very easy to link things. When they click on it, an audio file plays, or when they click on it, it sends them to a video instruction of you explaining that activity. Maybe it's even a Google slide with 9 embedded videos that are hosted on your own drive with you
Right.
giving instructions. And then that becomes the asynchronous. Oh, today I'm going to do the second one. They click on it. You're giving them the instructions in that video, or high energy, oh, look at this. Can you find this many objects in your house that look just like this? And they press pause and off they go and they're joining in. And that becomes your Hyflex continuous provision, because continuous provision in the classroom would be with stations and areas. So that's how I would approach that one.
And also, I noticed that a lot of the really good primary schools have actually put together physical packs of things,
Right.
to
That's what
actually send home, so that there is something physical to go along with. But also, kids at home, they probably do have Legos and saucepans and things, and go back to those kind of basics. You want a music lesson? Hey, let's be honest. We can mute them if they're going to go bash the saucepans. Doesn't really matter.
The kitchen is a music room.
That's right.
it's really
You
great that you
know.
mentioned school actually gives boxes of material to our younger kids, and that's it takes a lot of pre-planning though, and I guess that's
It
something
does. It does.
to
But
emphasize
at the
that
younger end, you can afford to get away with more repetition. So that's
that's
the
correct.
only good thing about it. You can, like you say, you can have a library of activities and go around them a few times. Um,
Mhm.
but I think also remember that these children, if they get 2 to 3 hours of content per day, I think that's already all they need. I don't
Mhm.
think they need a full 5 hours of babysitting.
Right.
Give them 2 to 3 hours and let them play. Let them use some Lego and stuff, and read some books and all those kind of cool things that they can do. But I think if you can get 2 hours of good quality content to a younger child, actually that's going to be great, and that can be just spread out throughout the day if they're stuck at home.
Absolutely, James. I mean, the importance of play. It's just, yeah, play is so incredibly important at a young age that that should really be the emphasis. Give them ways to play. If you are going to be asked to, do Hyflex learning, and you have that student there, and that you're told that they're going to be there for a full hour, find ways to make that hour 40 minutes of play and 20 minutes of instruction.
Yeah.
Find the play in your lesson.
And if they do have devices or phones or something, things like Flipgrid are very happy because they don't have to write them. They can just record their voice, and they'll have a lot of fun playing around with that and sending you messages and sending you stories and drawing pictures, all of those things that they like to do in school. Let them do it at home, because in most cases, those kind of basics are there. There's normally some paper or some kind of coloring tools and things like that. So try and get them to do some of that off screen as well, so that they've got a connection. And even if they've got an adult in the area, they'll be able to perhaps fetch something for them or do the basics, even if they're not going to be able to give really dedicated support.
Mhm.
My
Okay.
sister, who's in preschool, I mean, she's teaching preschool, so she has been using a lot of Seesaw, more than the Google Classroom.
Mm.
She mentioned that it's due to the aesthetics also of the
Mm-hmm.
of the device,
Mm-hmm.
of the app, and at the same time, the video function is very
Mm-hmm.
helpful for little
Mm-hmm.
kids. So that is
Mhm.
something that our teachers can be using, so that they can really
Mm.
see what the students are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always that level of person that you can personalize the learning of the student. And I also like to mention the what Sethi said. um when you give like videos to students, it's also important that you are the one who's going to who's going to be seen in the video. I
Mhm.
think
Mm.
most of the teachers would forget that,
Mm.
mainly because there are so many resources online. There
Mm.
are so many resources online that they can just put a link and the students can click. But there's
Mm.
always that difference when a student sees their teacher on a recorded video
Mhm.
and seeing themselves there. I mean, there's really something different about that.
Well, there's a special connection with your actual teacher if they taught you. But I think it's, you should mix and stuff. And Seesaw
Right.
is a really powerful thing. And I think Adriana mentioned book creators as well. Both of those
Mm.
are excellent tools for the younger years. Yeah. Sethi, any others?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Seesaw, the interface is just much more primary and younger friendly. As is Flipgrid. Flipgrid is just,
Right.
when you look at it,
Mm.
it shouts younger ages. It
Younger.
doesn't say, you've got to be 16 to work this. Google Classroom, on the other hand, it is a bit more formal, and it feels formal, and it looks
Mm.
formal, and that would probably be the biggest, it'd be great to have some sort of Google Classroom skin for younger years, where it
Mhm.
just looks more attractive. As a school, we use Tapestry a lot, which
Mhm.
is what we've been using as teachers to track progress. But that also
Mhm.
has Tapestry activities, which allows us to share things.
Right.
But again, yes, it needs to be right for your class. And the younger they are, the more important it is for them to see their teacher. And I know, many teachers may not feel confident on
Comfortable.
camera, or they don't want to be on camera, or they don't. No problem. If you found a great story, just introduce it.
Mhm.
Find that 15-minute video that you want to share, and instead of just sharing the video, maybe record a 1-minute message for your student and then link to the video.
Right.
Even if it's
Mhm.
just 1 minute of, I found this amazing story last night. I think you're gonna love it. It's all about this tiny little bunny, and the bunny goes on a walk. Do you know what? You'll find out in a minute. Boom, and play that video. That's it. It's a couple of seconds, but just that will make it their video. It's a video you found for them. It's no longer just YouTube, because they
Right.
all
Mhm.
know about YouTube. They know, you're watching a video, I don't know that person. Well, that's YouTube. Oh, that's Blippi on YouTube. They,
Mhm.
Mm.
they know about YouTube, but introduce it. And
Mhm.
if you don't
Mhm.
feel comfortable with video, do it as a live. Just
Mhm.
open up your camera feed, do it live. Don't record that part then, but at least introduce it. So I think
Yeah,
I
that's
think
right.
it's little things like that.
Mhm. Just to build that connection between you and
Mm.
your student. Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
So, another question that we have is, what issues do you see with the paradigm, and do you have suggestions on how to best overcome them?
Um, I think the big problem is always the amount of preparation you're going to have to do, and just the disconnect. You do need to have cooperation from your students to do this, and you know it's hard. You lose out on the social value in a lot of things. It is always going to be a compromise, and I think
Mhm.
that's it. It is a compromise. So, for example, I have to be very careful with my choice of product. So I quite often, when I'm doing Hyflex Learning, use Pear Deck, but
Mm.
there are limitations with Pear Deck. Number one, I can't do animations.
Mm.
It isn't PowerPoint. It isn't Keynote. I can't fully animate my slides. It is one slide after another. But on the other hand, it is interactive. The kids can draw. The kids can add things to it, and they can do that. But it means that whether you're in the classroom or you're at home, you can see the presentation nice and clearly. And but that is a compromise, right?
Mm.
um, or I would use Google Slides or Office 365, but I would have to upload it ahead of time. So you lose a bit of spontaneity because students will naturally skip ahead. You can't always deliver those fun moments, those laugh lines, those kind of things that you got lined up, and that kind of timing doesn't go up, um, and you want to have those little jokes and times and little twists and things, and you can't do that online because you've got to accept they're going to probably read ahead, they're going to try and do those things, but yeah, you've got to put the preparation ahead of the lesson. Also, I would say when it comes to assessment, think of things like Pear Deck, think of Google Forms, think of things where the assessment can be marked instantly, even if that means you can't have a handwritten piece. Handwriting. Actually, what? Actually, I don't know about you, Sethi, but apart from my handwriting, my students' handwriting hasn't gotten bad.
Mine is horrible, and I had
Mine was to
handwriting.
begin with, to be
I
honest,
had
but
3
I
hours
used the
of
excuse.
handwriting lessons a week, and mine is horrible. So
I was going to say, I don't think, I mean, I mocked a ton of handwritten stuff, and they've been online for ages, and it was all perfectly readable for my class, and I was like teaching computer science, so I wasn't expecting anything special, but I didn't. Yeah, handwrite. A lot of teachers have been saying, "What happens to handwriting?" And actually, certainly in high school and up the top end, nothing. It seemed fine. What about you? Down, lower down, surely must be.
lower down, we have seen a change, but
Yeah.
nothing that is too worrying. I think
No.
it's more of a, I mean, as with everything, it's about balance, isn't it? And
It is.
if you provide a lot of fine motor for those very young ones, a lot of fine motor skill activities, we have some of our children have come back with incredible handwriting. Does that mean they've been practicing their handwriting? Not at all. They've just been drawing every day. And
That's
so
it. I think drawing's just a good way
it's
to get around,
balance,
isn't
it's
it?
balancing it.
Yeah.
And then we have some other students that have done nothing but digital drawing. Well, their handwriting is also improved because guess what? They were drawing in Procreate. Well, they were developing those same skills.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, definitely. And I agree again, I agree with you, James. It is, the prep will be incredibly important. Be deliberate about the choices you make, about the activities you have. I would even add on to that, take your time before deciding on which tech platform to use. Watch a couple of videos, do a bit of research, because, for example, if you're going to use a tool, you want to know that that tool will not have animations. You want to know that before you waste your time creating animations. For example, perfect example, Zoom with a PowerPoint as a background. Now, I know so many people that spend time making amazing PowerPoints with flashy animations. And then I ask them, well, how are you going to deliver this to your student? Oh, I'm going to use it as a background in Zoom. It's like, you do realize that those animations won't be working then. As in, it's little things like that. Know the tool you're going to use and know it well enough. That doesn't mean that you have to know everything. But you don't use a tool you've only ever used once before.
I mean, I will stress the way to dodge that would have been to display PowerPoint or Keynote in the window. So go to your slideshow and window. We're not giving you one, but you need to know that most of these interactive development tools like Pear Deck and a bunch of others, they take a picture and that's how they do it. There's no animation, not even animated GIFs in Pear Deck.
Yeah, and again, it's different tools do things differently, and if you're choosing the right one, then you're going to have more successful lessons. As long as you, again, keep in mind it's a Hyflex environment. Some will be in person, some will be online. Does this work for everyone? If it does, great, let's do it. If it doesn't work for everyone, how can I accommodate those others?
So a lot of planning for our teachers out there.
I'm afraid so. I mean that's ultimately it is, but also try to think how you can simplify. I can use Keynote, we can use PowerPoint, we can use slides without any difficulties and happily play with them. If you know one tool, use that tool. Get the best out of that tool. Don't stress yourself. Now is not the time to learn new tools for the sake of it. You know, if you've got a massive gap or a massive problem, then yeah, you might have to learn something. But if you know a slideshow presenter, if you know Kami, which has been mentioned, if you know Kahoot or quizzes or Lookit, then stick with that one that you know. If you know Quizlets, then stick with those quizzing tools that you know. You know, now's not necessarily the time to learn another one. Another one that's very useful is Edpuzzle, which is really handy because then you can quickly put videos. The thing is, Edpuzzle has become so big now. The other day, I wanted something quite specialized in computer science. I said, oh, just chuck in a search in Edpuzzle. And not only did I get the video, I also got the questions with it, which was like, hey. So that there can be shortcuts, especially with the more well-known tools. And use them. Please use them. You know, try not to reinvent the wheel if you don't have to, because I do think those are just powerful tools that can really help you. And for the younger children, just think to yourself, what can you do that's around the house that will give them some fun, what can you send the parents? Can you send them a pack of physical stuff? Have they got Lego? And you know what? With year ones, what is more awesome than a treasure hunt around your house to gather the resources you need for future lessons? Because then you know what they have and haven't got.
I agree. So really great advice there. Concentrate on the planning, just using the tools that you know, and really putting forward organization more than anything. So if you have any questions, actually just put them in the comments box and we'll list them. How any more questions from you?
No, I just want to react with what James mentioned. And also Sethi, that if you just know one tool and you're comfortable using it, I'm pretty sure that your students will also be able to be comfortable using it.
Mm,
I realized that a lot of teachers have been really using, like, for example, Google Docs or Google Slides or yeah, Kahoot quizzes, even when there are certain times that you have been using them over and over, the students are still very appreciative of that.
mhm.
The students are also getting familiarized with it, and it won't be a it won't become a roadblock to their learning,
Mm. I mean,
because
Mhm.
of course we
eventually,
want, yeah, we want task variety, but that
right,
doesn't mean application variety. You
right,
know, any
Yeah.
slides package can do so many activities from mix and match to, if you think about using it creatively and getting the max out of it, there's a few things each tool
Yeah.
can't quite do as well as the other. But ultimately, in terms of the learning, they're all quite capable. And
Oh,
with a couple of extensions, Google Slide, things like that too.
right,
also,
Mhm,
one thing
mhm,
I might add to that is don't be afraid to say this is not for me. There are
mhm,
so many tools out there, and often we'll get suggestions from colleagues. Like, oh, maybe check this out, have a look at this weekend, and you might
Mm,
like it. And but then when you come to it, you say, yeah, this is great. The technology is there, and it looks amazing. It's got all this functionality, but I don't need it. I don't need this. Like a
Right.
simple slides is good enough.
mm,
Do you need all the fancy, bells and whistles and PowerPoint? Then use it. If you don't need
Mhm,
it, then PowerPoint online is just as good. It works as well. Slides will work as well. We had a workshop with parents, and I
mhm,
really wanted the Q&A, and I wanted it to be live and have a good Q&A. I personally don't like what the Q&A looks like in Google Slides. So the
right,
audience, I'm not a
Gets
big fan of that. So guess what? I jumped onto Canva, I used their presentation tool, and their Q&A is amazing. It's clean, minimalistic, but I use slides for everything else. So don't be afraid to say, right, this is not for this activity. And no matter how much others tell you how amazing it is, if it's not for you, don't feel bad about that, because
right.
mm.
it's no point in forcing yourself to use something that you're not happy with.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, a lot of
Yeah.
the times, teachers to just use the tool that you think will, hit your standard or will really
I mean,
fulfill your objective. Yeah.
honestly, we're obviously a GEG, so I'm going to go with the Google ones. But the big three are Docs, Slides, and Google Forms.
Right.
Use those three, you can do just about anything. You
Mm,
know, of course, I tend to use Sheets quite a lot, but that's not necessarily required for a lot of things. But ultimately, if you've got those big three and Office 365, you've got OneNote, you've got Word, and you've got PowerPoint.
mhm.
And if you're exclusive Apple, you've got Keynote Pages,
Okay.
and actually, you haven't got
And I
anything
might
for
add
Google
to that,
Forms.
don't underestimate.
But
I might add to that, James, don't underestimate, and I know you use it all the time, but for those listening and watching, do not underestimate the power a Google site can have in terms of
mm,
Mhm,
sharing your
mm,
resources. Google
mm,
mhm,
Sites makes it so easy to share something within a domain or outside a domain, give people access, and all the resources are there. It's just ready,
mm,
ready to go. And you can hide pages and then make them visible when you're delivering those lessons. So I mean, Google Sites has it. So even if your school is struggling, say monetarily, or there's no budget for things within Google Workspace, even without the upgraded accounts, the plus accounts, you've got access to everything you need. Yes, there may not be any bells and whistles, but you don't need them.
No.
Long as
And the other thing is, YouTube does give you unlimited space to store video. I mean, even unlisted. I mean, what an incredible tool. I mean, you can any lesson you can deliver in person, you can put on a YouTube video, you can get your kids to film it. And that's why we're saying asynchronous is often less pressure, because you can video the lesson and give it to the students for later.
Yes, and it doesn't have to be fancy. You just have to deliver your lesson. Okay,
That's
it seems
right.
like we're running out of time. Any last words
Mhm.
from Sethi?
I would just say, just try and continue to do what you do, and when you are faced with that high flex, just be mindful of, it's different, but it's not just different for you. And it's challenging, but it's not just challenging for you. It's also challenging for the parents. It's also challenging for the student. It's challenging for everyone involved, and things will go wrong. Be okay with that and have a backup plan. So that would be my biggest sort of, if things do go wrong, don't blame yourself. You've done the planning, you've done the prep work, you've done the things will go wrong. They always do. So I would just be prepared for that. And just, smile. It'll be fine.
I would just say, if you can get your resources done ahead of time, then the backup plan is they read the Google Doc, they just read the materials, they watch the video, whatever it is. They might have internet problems as well. Look, these are difficult times and everybody's doing their best. And I think that's all we can ask from anybody. And teachers have just been absolutely incredible over the last 2-3 years, and really gone the extra mile, along with a lot of other professions. But I would say, the big three professions have worked so incredibly hard. Our nurses, our doctors, our teachers, people who are trying to get food and maneuver everything. They have done so much extra. Our IT people behind the scenes, and programmers, they've all worked incredibly hard to make sure that you can have some kind of experience. And we all know it's a compromise, right? We know it's a compromise. And I think that's okay.
So
Great.
thank you so much for that, Sethi and James. But before we go, if our teachers that they're watching with us right now wants to see you more, wants to hunt you down in the internet, where are we gonna find you? You might want to promote your the things that you do for the teachers as well.
Yeah, I mean, my Twitter account is at ESLWeb, and obviously, if you want to find out how to really motivate students in these kind of difficult high flex times, my book is The Gamified Classroom, which you can find at Amazon without any trouble whatsoever. And I'm sure Gary is about to put the link up. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where we try to come up with ideas to help you and to make things a bit more motivational. And I think that is really important. Let me just pop the link up. I'll put it on YouTube, but I think for those people on Facebook, I'll let Gary do that bit.
Sethi?
And for me, my handle, you'll see it on screen right here. So that's the Twitter handle, where I would love to connect with anyone watching. And then also on YouTube, I am always sharing new videos and new things, which would be flipped classroom tutorials, which I'm sure our friend Gary in the back has a link for that, which is on YouTube. And then obviously, linked to the YouTube account and my Twitter account. You can find me, anywhere when you just look for Sethi de Clercq, which is my full name, or flipped classroom tutorials, and then you'll find it as well.
All right, great. So wonderful. Thank you very much, Sethi and James, for coming to our channel. Really great words and really great advice from you for all the Filipino teachers out there. So thank you also, Pao, for co-hosting this session with me. So once again, this is an event organized together with GEG APAC across the Asia Pacific. The other GEGs are also running similar workshops in their home countries. And we're so lucky to have some of the best minds, I think, in educational technology in the region with us. So thank you very much, James and Sethi. Such a wonderful time. This past hour just went by so quickly. I can't believe it's been an hour. Gary has joined us. Gary, would you like to say hello?
I just want to say thank you to Sethi and James for saying yes to our invitation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your great inputs, and thank you, man, and Paula, for hosting this event. Thank you so much. So,
Yeah, so
on
thank
behalf of GEG APAC,
all
Thank
right. So
you. Bye
thank you.
bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank you very much.
everyone.
bye everyone.
Rest of your evening. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat.
Yes.